What would you do if months of sacrifice were destroyed in minutes by your own family? Today, we bring you the story of Marcus Thompson, a dedicated father from Detroit who worked himself to exhaustion for 6 months, taking on double shifts at the automotive plant, all to make his 16-year-old son's dream come true. That dream was a gleaming chrome street bike, the kind that turns heads on every corner. But what should have been a moment of pure joy turned into a nightmare that would tear his family apart. This is a story about sacrifice, betrayal, and the impossible question, where do we draw the line when family crosses it? Stay with us, because what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Marcus Thompson had always been a man of his word. At 42 years old, he had spent 2 decades working at the General Motors assembly plant on the east side of Detroit. The work was hard, the kind that left your back aching and your hands calloused. But it was honest work, and Marcus took pride in it. He lived in a modest 2-story house in the Warrendale neighborhood, where the streets were lined with oak trees, and the houses, though weathered by Michigan winters, still held the dignity of a working-class community that refused to give up. His son, Tyler, was everything to him. At 16, Tyler was at that age where boys start becoming men, where they start dreaming bigger dreams, and wanting things that cost more than a father's weekly paycheck can cover. Tyler had always been fascinated by motorcycles. Every weekend, he would sit on the front porch with his laptop, watching videos of chrome street bikes cruising down highways, their engines roaring like thunder, their polished surfaces reflecting the summer sun like liquid silver. One evening in early March, as the last remnants of snow melted from the sidewalks and the promise of spring hung in the air, Tyler showed his father a video. It was a chrome street bike, a Harley-Davidson Street 750, its entire body polished to a mirror finish. The bike gleamed under the California sun in the video, and Tyler's eyes gleamed just as bright. "Marcus, what do you think?" Tyler asked, his voice carrying that mixture of hope and resignation that comes from wanting something you know is out of reach. Marcus looked at the screen, then at his son's face. He saw himself at that age, full of dreams in a city that didn't always make dreams easy to achieve. The bike cost $7,000, not including taxes and registration. Marcus made decent money at the plant, but between the mortgage, utilities, car payments, and all the expenses that come with raising a teenager, there wasn't much left over for dreams. But as Marcus sat there that evening, watching his son's face, he made a decision. He would make this happen. Somehow. The next Monday, Marcus approached his supervisor at the plant. "I want to take on double shifts," he said, "as many as you can give me." His supervisor, a heavy-set man named Bill who had worked at the plant for 30 years, looked at him with concern. "Marcus, double shifts will kill you. You're already doing 40 hours a week. You sure about this?" Marcus nodded. "I have my reasons." And so it began. For the next 6 months, Marcus Thompson became a ghost in his own life. He would leave the house at 5 in the morning, just as the first light of dawn touched the Detroit skyline with its abandoned factories and new construction projects existing side by side, symbols of a city constantly reinventing itself. He would work his regular 8-hour shift, assembling engine components with the precision that came from 20 years of practice. Then, instead of going home, he would clock in for another 8 hours, sometimes working until 2 in the morning. The Detroit summer hit hard that year. Inside the plant, the heat was suffocating. The air conditioning struggled to keep up with the machinery, and by midday, the temperature inside could reach 90 degrees. Marcus would drink water by the gallon, his work clothes soaked through with sweat, his body screaming for rest. But every time he thought about quitting, he would picture Tyler's face, that look of hope mixed with resignation, and he would push through one more hour, one more shift, One more day. His body began to show the strain. Dark circles formed under his eyes, permanent shadows that no amount of sleep on his days off could erase. His back, which had always given him some trouble, began to ache constantly, a dull throb that became sharp pain whenever he bent or lifted. His hands, already rough from years of factory work, developed new calluses on top of old ones, the skin thick and cracked despite the lotion he applied each night. His wife, Sarah, worried constantly. "Marcus, you're killing yourself," she would say, watching him come home at 3 a.m, barely able to climb the stairs to their bedroom. "Is a motorcycle really worth your health?" But Marcus would just smile, that tired smile of a man who has made up his mind. "It's not about the motorcycle, Sarah. It's about showing our son that when you want something badly enough, you work for it. It's about keeping promises, even the ones you make to yourself." Tyler noticed the change in his father, though Marcus tried to hide the worst of it. He noticed how his dad moved slower, how he sometimes winced when he thought no one was looking, how he fell asleep in his recliner every evening before 8 o'clock. Tyler felt guilty, though he didn't fully understand why his father was working so hard. Marcus had told him he was saving up for something special, but hadn't revealed what. As summer turned to fall and the Michigan weather began its inevitable slide toward winter, Marcus watched his bank account grow. Every 2 weeks, he would check the balance, watching the numbers climb. $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. He had opened a separate savings account for this purpose, one that Sarah knew about, but that they both agreed not to touch for anything else. In late September, Marcus finally hit his target. With taxes and registration, he had saved $8,200. It was more than enough. That night, after finishing his double shift at 2:30 in the morning, Marcus sat in his car in the plant parking lot and cried. They were tears of exhaustion, yes, but also tears of accomplishment. He had done it. 6 months of sacrifice, of pain, of missing family dinners, and falling asleep before he could say goodnight to his son. But he had done it. The next day, Marcus called the Harley-Davidson dealership in Warren. "I'm looking for a chrome street bike," he told the salesman. "The Street 750, fully chromed. I'm paying cash." The salesman, who had heard plenty of people say they were paying cash only to back out later, perked up when Marcus gave him his name and said he would be there in an hour. When Marcus arrived at the dealership, still wearing his work clothes, still smelling faintly of machine oil and metal, the salesman showed him to the bike. It was even more beautiful in person than it had been in the videos. Every surface that could be chromed was chromed. The tank, the fenders, the exhaust pipes, the handlebars, everything gleamed under the dealership lights like it was made of liquid silver. Marcus ran his hand along the tank, feeling the cool, smooth surface, and smiled. This was it. This was 6 months of his life, transformed into something that would bring his son joy. 3 hours later, after all the paperwork was signed and the insurance was arranged, Marcus rode the bike home himself. He had gotten his motorcycle license 20 years ago and still renewed it every few years, though he rarely rode anymore. The bike handled like a dream, powerful but responsive, and as he cruised down the streets of Detroit, feeling the October wind against his face, Marcus felt young again. He pulled into his driveway just before 5 in the evening. Sarah was in the kitchen, and when she heard the unfamiliar engine sound, she came to the window. When she saw Marcus on the chrome bike, her hand went to her mouth, and tears filled her eyes. She understood in that moment exactly what the last 6 months had been about. But Tyler wasn't home yet. He was at football practice and wouldn't be back for another hour. Marcus carefully parked the bike in the garage, covering it with a tarp, hiding it from view. Tomorrow was Saturday, Tyler's 17th birthday. Marcus had planned the reveal down to the minute. That night, Marcus slept better than he had in 6 months. His back still ached, his hands were still rough and calloused, but his heart was full. Tomorrow he would see his son's face light up in a way he had never seen before. Tomorrow, all the sacrifice would be worth it. Or so he thought. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes Michigan beautiful. The leaves on the oak trees lining Marcus's street had turned brilliant shades of orange and gold, and they rustled in the gentle breeze like nature's own celebration. Marcus woke up early, despite it being his day off, too excited to sleep. Sarah was already in the kitchen, preparing Tyler's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with maple syrup and crispy bacon. Tyler, unaware of what awaited him, stumbled downstairs around 9 o'clock, still in his pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The house smelled amazing, and he could hear his mother humming in the kitchen, always a sign that something good was happening. "Happy birthday, son," Marcus said, standing at the bottom of the stairs with a smile so wide it made his face hurt. Tyler grinned. "Thanks, Dad." He had expected a nice day, maybe some gifts, probably a new video game or some clothes he had mentioned wanting. He had long since let go of the dream of the chrome bike. He knew his family's finances well enough to understand that such a purchase was beyond their reach. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window, painting golden rectangles on the wooden floor. Sarah had also made Tyler's favorite chocolate chip muffins, and they sat in a basket in the center of the table, still warm from the oven. It was a perfect family moment, the kind that Marcus had missed during his 6 months of double shifts. After breakfast, Marcus stood up. "I have something to show you," he said, his voice thick with emotion he was trying to control. "Come with me to the garage." Tyler followed his father, curious but not expecting anything extraordinary. Maybe his dad had fixed up the old lawnmower or organized his tool collection. But when Marcus opened the garage door and pulled the tarp off the motorcycle, Tyler froze. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes grew wide, then wider, and then tears began to stream down his face. The chrome bike sat there in the garage, catching the morning light that filtered through the open door, every surface gleaming like it belonged in a museum rather than in a modest garage in Detroit. "Dad," Tyler finally whispered, his voice breaking, is this... He couldn't even form the question. "Happy birthday, son," Marcus said, and then Tyler was in his arms, hugging him so tight Marcus thought his ribs might crack. Tyler was crying openly now, deep sobs of joy and disbelief and gratitude all mixed together. Marcus held his son, feeling his own tears run down his face, and thought about every single double shift, every aching muscle, every moment of exhaustion. This moment right here made it all worth it. "I don't understand," Tyler said, pulling back and wiping his face. When did you? "I worked double shifts for 6 months, Marcus said simply. "Every extra hour went into this account. I wanted to show you that when you work hard enough, dreams can come true." Tyler walked around the bike slowly, running his fingers along the chrome tank, the handlebars, the seat. It was like touching something from another world. "Dad, this is the most incredible thing anyone has ever done for me. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Marcus replied. "Just promise me you'll be safe when you ride it. Always wear your helmet. Always follow the traffic laws. And never, ever ride if you've been drinking. This bike is a gift, but it's also a responsibility." "I promise," Tyler said solemnly. "I promise, Dad." The news of the bike spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By noon, there were at least a dozen people gathered in Marcus's driveway, neighbors who had known Tyler since he was a little boy, all coming to see the chrome street bike and congratulate the birthday boy. Mrs. Henderson from next door brought over a birthday cake she had baked. Old Mr. Patterson from down the street, a Vietnam veteran who had ridden motorcycles all his life, gave Tyler a 30-minute lecture on proper riding technique and bike maintenance. It was in the midst of this celebration that Marcus's sister, Janet, arrived with her two sons, Jake, who was 14, and Connor, who was 12. Janet was 3 years younger than Marcus, and they had always had a complicated relationship. She had struggled financially for years, working multiple part-time jobs, and Marcus knew she sometimes resented what she perceived as his more stable life. "Wow, this is quite the party," Janet said, getting out of her minivan. "What's the occasion?" "Tyler's birthday," Sarah called out. "Come see what Marcus got him." Janet and her boys walked up the driveway, and when they saw the bike, Janet's expression changed. It was subtle, a tightening around her eyes, a slight downturn of her mouth, but Marcus noticed it. He had seen that look before, usually when he talked about taking the family on vacation or when he had bought Sarah a new car 2 years ago. "That's some birthday present," Janet said, her voice carefully neutral. "Must have cost a fortune." "I saved up," Marcus said simply, not wanting to get into the details of his sacrifice in front of everyone. Jake and Connor circled the bike like sharks, their eyes wide but their expressions hard to read. "Can we touch it?" Jake asked. "Sure," Tyler said generously. "Just be careful. It's brand new." The boys ran their hands over the chrome surfaces, whispering to each other. Marcus noticed they seemed more resentful than impressed, but he pushed the thought aside. They were just kids, he told himself. Kids who probably wished they had something this nice. The party continued into the afternoon. Marcus had ordered pizzas and people ate and laughed and told stories. Tyler couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop looking at the bike, couldn't stop saying thank you to his father. It was the kind of day Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. One of those perfect moments when everything feels right with the world. As evening approached and people began to leave, Janet pulled Marcus aside. "Listen, I'm really happy for Tyler," she said, though her eyes didn't match her words. "But I hope you know that Jake and Connor are going to be asking me for expensive gifts now. You've set quite the standard." Marcus frowned. "Janet, I worked 6 months of double shifts for this. I nearly broke my back. This wasn't about setting standards. This was about making my son's dream come true." "Well, not all of us can afford to make our kids' dreams come true," Janet shot back. "Some of us are still struggling to make rent." Marcus felt his temper flare, but pushed it down. "I've offered to help you, Janet. Multiple times. You're the one who always says no, because I don't want your charity," she snapped. Then, seeming to realize she had gone too far, she softened. "Look, I'm sorry. I'm happy for Tyler. Really, it's hard sometimes, seeing what you can give your kid when I can barely afford school supplies for mine." Marcus put his hand on his sister's shoulder. "I understand. And I'm always here if you need help. Not charity. Family helping family." Janet nodded, but Marcus could see the resentment still simmering in her eyes. She gathered her boys and left shortly after, and Marcus pushed the uncomfortable conversation out of his mind. This was Tyler's day, and he wasn't going to let anything ruin it. That evening, after the last guests had left and the pizza boxes were cleared away, Marcus carefully moved the bike into the garage and closed the door. He made a mental note to install a better lock on the garage door. The bike was insured, but still, Detroit had its share of theft, and he wanted to make sure Tyler's presence stayed safe. Before going to bed, Marcus stood in the garage for a few minutes, just looking at the bike. 6 months of his life were sitting right there, gleaming in the dim light from the overhead bulb. His back still ached, his hands were still rough, but as he looked at that chrome masterpiece, he felt nothing but pride and satisfaction. If only he had known what the next morning would bring, if only he had installed those better locks that very night, if only he had paid more attention to the looks on his nephews' faces. But Marcus Thompson, hard-working father and devoted husband, went to bed that night with a peaceful heart, believing that the hard part was over and that all that lay ahead was watching his son enjoy the gift he had sacrificed so much to provide. He had never been more wrong in his life. Sunday morning arrived grey and cold, the kind of October morning in Detroit where the sky looks like concrete and the wind carries the promise of the winter to come. Marcus slept late, his body finally allowing itself to rest after 6 months of relentless double shifts. When he woke up around 9:30, the house was quiet. Sarah had gone to the grocery store, leaving a note on the kitchen counter, and Tyler was still asleep, exhausted from the excitement of the previous day. Marcus made himself coffee, strong and black the way he liked it, and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard. The oak trees were nearly bare now, their leaves forming a carpet of golden brown across the grass. It was the kind of peaceful morning that made him grateful for his life, for his family, for the simple blessing of a day off. Around 10 o'clock, Tyler came downstairs, already dressed in jeans and his favorite Detroit Lions hoodie. "Morning, Dad," he said, his voice still carrying that excitement from yesterday. "Is it okay if I take the bike out for a short ride, just around the neighborhood?" Marcus smiled. "Did you finish your homework for Monday?" "Did it Friday night," Tyler said. "I knew I'd want to ride the bike all weekend." "All right then," Marcus said. "Helmet, gloves, and stay in the neighborhood. Back in 30 minutes. Tyler practically ran to the garage. Marcus heard the door open, heard his son's footsteps, and then heard something else. A sound that made his blood turn to ice. It was a scream, but not a scream of pain. It was a scream of pure anguish, of disbelief, of heartbreak. Marcus dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the kitchen floor, but he didn't notice. He ran to the garage, his heart pounding, his mind racing through terrible possibilities. An accident. Had the bike fallen over? Had someone broken in during the night? But nothing could have prepared him for what he saw when he reached the garage. Tyler stood frozen, his hand over his mouth, tears streaming down his face. The garage door was still closed. Nothing had been stolen. The bike was exactly where Marcus had left it the night before. But the chrome tank, that beautiful mirror-polished surface that had gleamed like liquid silver, was now covered in deep, deliberate scratches. And not just any scratches. 2 names had been carved into the chrome, the letters deep and jagged, done with something sharp and metal, probably a screwdriver or a knife. Jake, Connor. Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. He actually staggered, reaching out to grab the doorframe for support. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he might pass out. 6 months. 6 months of work. 6 months of double shifts, of exhaustion, of pain, of sacrifice, reduced to this, vandalized, destroyed by his own nephews. "No," Tyler whispered. "No, no, no." He walked toward the bike slowly, reaching out to touch the scratches as if he couldn't believe they were real. "Dad," he said, turning to Marcus with tears streaming down his face, "why would they do this?" Marcus couldn't speak. A rage was building inside him, the kind of rage he had never felt before, hot and consuming and terrifying in its intensity. His hands clenched into fists, his jaw locked so tight it hurt, and he could feel his heart pounding in his ears like a war drum. He walked to the bike, running his fingers over the scratches. They were deep, carved with force and deliberation. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't kids being careless. This was intentional vandalism, done with malice, with the clear intent to destroy something beautiful. "Stay here," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "I need to check something." He went inside to his computer in the small home office off the kitchen. Marcus had installed security cameras around the house 2 years ago, after there had been a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. The cameras recorded continuously, storing footage on a hard drive. His hands shook as he pulled up the footage from the garage camera. He fast-forwarded through the previous evening. There, around 11:30 p.m., long after everyone had gone home, the garage door opened. Marcus hadn't heard it because the garage was at the back of the house and his bedroom was at the front. In the grainy night vision footage, he watched as 2 figures entered the garage. Jake and Connor, his nephews, his sister's boys, his own blood. The footage showed everything, the boys looking around to make sure they were alone. Jake pulling a screwdriver from his pocket, Connor giggling as his older brother approached the bike. And then, with deliberate slowness, Jake began to carve his name into the chrome tank. Deep, angry scratches, while Connor watched and laughed. When Jake finished, he handed the screwdriver to Connor, who carved his own name with equal deliberation. The whole thing took about 10 minutes. When they were done, they stood back, admired their handiwork, and then left, closing the garage door quietly behind them. Marcus watched the footage 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. This wasn't a moment of anger or a stupid mistake. This was calculated. This was revenge. But revenge for what? For Tyler having something nice. For Marcus working hard to give his son a gift. Tyler had followed him into the office and watched the footage over his shoulder. When it ended, Tyler sat down heavily in the desk chair, his face pale. "They did it on purpose," he said quietly. "They planned it." Marcus's hands were shaking so badly he could barely control the mouse. He saved the footage to a USB drive, his mind already moving to what came next. He had to tell Janet. He had to confront his sister and make this right. Sarah came home from the grocery store to find Marcus and Tyler in the office, both looking like they had seen a ghost. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down the grocery bags. Marcus showed her the bike. He showed her the footage. Sarah, who almost never cried, stood in the garage with tears running down her face, one hand covering her mouth. "Those boys," she whispered. "How could they? They're family." "That's exactly why it hurts so much," Marcus said, his voice hollow. The 3 of them stood in the garage, staring at the ruined bike. The chrome that wasn't scratched still gleamed in the dim light, making the vandalism even more stark and heartbreaking. This bike, which had represented 6 months of Marcus's life, which had been a symbol of a father's love and sacrifice, was now scarred permanently, marked with the names of family members who had chosen spite over respect. Tyler was the first to speak. "Dad," he said quietly, "can it be fixed?" Marcus pulled out his phone and called the Harley-Davidson dealership. He spoke to the service manager, describing the damage. The manager was silent for a long moment. "That kind of damage to a chrome tank," he finally said. "There's no way to buff it out. The scratches are too deep. You'd need to replace the entire tank, and for a fully chromed tank on a Street 750, you're looking at about $1,500 for the part, plus labor." Marcus felt sick. $1,500! More than 2 weeks of his regular salary, a month of groceries for his family. He hung up and looked at Tyler. "It can be fixed, but it's going to cost $1,500. Tyler's face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have bragged about the bike. I shouldn't have let them touch it." Marcus pulled his son into a hug. "This is not your fault," he said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Jake and Connor did this, not you." But even as he comforted his son, Marcus felt his rage building again. He needed to confront Janet. He needed to make this right. He needed his nephews to understand the consequences of what they had done. He pulled out his phone and called his sister. It went to voicemail. "Janet," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "call me back immediately. Your boys vandalized Tyler's bike last night. I have video evidence. We need to talk. Now." He hung up and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. Finally, his phone rang. It was Janet. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice defensive before the conversation had even really started. "Your boys came back to my house last night after everyone left," Marcus said, each word carefully enunciated. "They broke into my garage and scratched their names into Tyler's bike. Deep scratches. The chrome tank is ruined. I have the whole thing on security camera footage." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, in a voice that made Marcus's blood boil, Janet said, "You're exaggerating. They're just kids. Kids make mistakes." "Mistakes?" Marcus nearly shouted. "Janet, they deliberately carved their names into the tank with a screwdriver. This wasn't a mistake. This was vandalism. Intentional, calculated vandalism. Well, maybe if you didn't flaunt your expensive purchases in front of my boys, they wouldn't have felt the need to do something like that," Janet snapped back. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Are you seriously blaming me for this? I worked 6 months of double shifts to buy that bike. I nearly destroyed my health. And your boys ruined it because they were jealous?" "It's just a bike, Marcus," Janet said. "You're acting like they committed murder." "It's not just a bike," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It's 6 months of my life. It's every hour I spent away from my family, every night I came home in pain. And your boys destroyed it for fun. The damage is going to cost $1,500 to fix." "Well, I don't have $1,500, Janet said flatly. "I can barely make rent." "You know that? Then your boys are going to have to work it off," Marcus said. "They can do yard work. They can help me with projects around the house. I don't care how long it takes, but they're going to make this right. You're not making my sons do manual labor like they're your servants," Janet said, her voice rising. "They made a mistake. Get over it." "Get over it?" Marcus repeated, incredulous. "Janet, they committed a crime. I have video evidence. I could press charges." "You wouldn't dare," Janet said. "I'm your sister. And they're my nephews," Marcus shot back, "but that doesn't give them the right to destroy other people's property. Come over here, right now. Bring your boys. We're going to settle this face to face." "I'm not bringing my boys over there so you can yell at them," Janet said. "Just file an insurance claim and move on with your life. The insurance deductible is $1,000, Marcus said, plus my rates will go up. This is going to cost me one way or another. Your boys need to face consequences for their actions. They're kids, Marcus, kids. Stop trying to ruin their lives over a stupid motorcycle." And with that, Janet hung up. Marcus stood in his office, staring at his phone, unable to process what had just happened. His sister, his own blood, had just dismissed the destruction of 6 months of his life as if it were nothing, had defended her son's deliberate act of vandalism, had refused to make them face any consequences at all. Tyler had heard the entire conversation. "Dad," he said quietly, "what are we going to do?" Marcus looked at his son, at the bike with the jagged names carved into its surface, at his wife standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes, and he made a decision. "I'm going to make this right," he said, "whatever it takes." But the cost of making it right, Marcus would soon discover, would be far higher than $1,500. It would cost him his relationship with his sister, divide his extended family, and force him to choose between family loyalty and justice. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with strangers. Sometimes they're fought with the people who share your blood. And sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that some relationships can't be saved. Monday morning arrived with a cold rain that matched Marcus's mood perfectly. He had barely slept, lying awake most of the night, replaying the security footage in his mind, remembering his sister's dismissive words, feeling the weight of what he knew he had to do, pressing down on his chest like a physical force. Sarah had tried to talk him down the night before. "Maybe we should just let it go," she had said gently, lying beside him in the darkness. "Family is more important than money, isn't it?" But Marcus had shaken his head. "This isn't about money anymore," he had replied. "This is about teaching those boys that actions have consequences. If Janet won't do it, someone has to." At 6 a.m., despite it being his day off after working 6 straight days, Marcus got dressed and drove to Janet's apartment in River Rouge, a working-class suburb southwest of Detroit, where his sister had lived for the past 3 years. The apartment complex was run down, with peeling paint and a parking lot full of potholes, and Marcus felt a twinge of guilt as he pulled up. He knew his sister struggled. He knew money was tight for her, but that didn't excuse what her sons had done. He knocked on the door, hard, 3 times. It was early enough that he knew he would wake them up, and part of him wanted that. wanted to disrupt their morning the way his peace had been disrupted. Janet answered the door in her bathrobe, her hair messy, her eyes still puffy with sleep. "Marcus, what the hell? It's 6 in the morning. We need to talk," Marcus said. "Now. I told you on the phone. I'm not discussing this," Janet said, starting to close the door. Marcus put his hand on the door, stopping her. "Janet, I'm not leaving until we settle this. Either invite me in, or we can have this conversation in the hallway where all your neighbors can hear." Janet glared at him, but stepped back, letting him in. The apartment was small and cluttered, toys scattered across the living room floor, dishes piled in the sink visible from the doorway. The walls were thin, and Marcus could hear a television playing in the apartment next door. "You have no right to show up here like this," Janet hissed, keeping her voice low so she wouldn't wake her boys. "You can't barge into my life and make demands. Your sons committed a crime," Marcus said flatly. "They trespassed on my property and caused $1,500 in damage. I have video evidence. I'm not making demands, Janet. I'm giving you a chance to make this right before I take it further." "Take it further?" Janet laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What are you going to do, Marcus? Call the police on your own nephews? Have them arrested?" "They're 14 and 12 years old. Old enough to know right from wrong," Marcus said. "Old enough to understand that you don't destroy other people's property." "Where did you go wrong with them, Janet? How did they turn into the kind of kids who would do something like this?" Janet's face flushed red. "Don't you dare lecture me about parenting. You with your perfect life, your perfect house, your perfect son. You have no idea what it's like to raise kids on your own, to work 3 part-time jobs just to keep a roof over their heads." "I offered to help you," Marcus said, his voice rising, "multiple times. Every time you said no. You said you didn't want my charity." "Because I have pride," Janet shot back. "Because I don't want to be the poor sister who always has her hand out." "But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've always had it easy." "Easy?" Marcus felt his temper snap. "I worked double shifts for 6 months, 16-hour days. I nearly destroyed my back. I missed family dinners, school events, every evening with my wife and son. I sacrificed for 6 months to buy Tyler that bike. And your boys destroyed it in 10 minutes because they were jealous. Don't you dare tell me I have it easy." "They're kids," Marcus, Janet said. But her voice had lost some of its edge. She knew she was on weak ground. "They made a mistake." "A mistake is breaking a glass or forgetting to do homework," Marcus said. "This was intentional, calculated. They planned it. They brought a screwdriver. They waited until everyone was asleep. This wasn't a mistake, Janet. This was revenge." "Revenge for what?" Janet asked. But Marcus could see in her eyes that she knew the answer. "For Tyler having something nice," Marcus said quietly. "For me being able to give my son something they don't have. But that's not Tyler's fault. That's not my fault, and it sure as hell doesn't give them the right to destroy it." Janet was silent for a long moment. Then in a small voice she asked, "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to make them face consequences," Marcus said. "I want them to apologize to Tyler in person. I want them to work off the cost of the repair, whether that's doing yard work, washing cars, helping with projects, whatever. And I want you to get them counseling, because kids who do something like this need help." "I can't afford counseling," Janet said. "Then I'll pay for it," Marcus said. "But this has to be addressed, Janet. If you let this go, if you teach them that they can do something like this and face no consequences, you're setting them up to fail in life." Janet sat down heavily on her worn couch. "I know they shouldn't have done it," she said finally. "I know it was wrong. But Marcus, I can't pay $1,500. I'm already behind on rent." "They can work it off," Marcus repeated. $10 an hour, that's 150 hours of work. Split between both boys, that's 75 hours each. 1 day a week for the next year and a half. That's reasonable." Janet shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. If I make them do that, they'll hate me. They'll hate you. They'll hate Tyler even more than they apparently already do." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "They hate Tyler." Janet looked away. They've always been jealous of him, you know that. Tyler has both parents. Tyler has a nice house. Tyler gets good grades without trying. Tyler is good at sports. And now Tyler has a $7,000 motorcycle. They've been hearing about Tyler their whole lives, from me, from Grandma, from everyone. Perfect Tyler. Why can't you be more like Tyler? Marcus sat down, the weight of understanding settling over him. You compared them to Tyler? What else was I supposed to do, Janet said, and now there were tears in her eyes. I'm trying to motivate them, trying to show them that if they work hard like Tyler, if they make good choices like Tyler, they can have nice things too. But all they hear is that they're not good enough. So they vandalized his bike to hurt him, Marcus said quietly. To hurt me, to get revenge for all those comparisons. I didn't know they were going to do that, Janet said quickly. I swear, Marcus, if I had known, I would have stopped them. But you created the environment where they thought it was justified, Marcus said. You turned my son into the enemy in their minds. The apartment fell silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a baby started crying. Janet wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her bathrobe. What do you want from me, Marcus? She asked again, her voice defeated. I want you to bring them to my house this afternoon, Marcus said. I want them to see the damage they caused. I want them to apologize to Tyler. And then we're going to work out a plan for them to make this right. If you refuse, Janet, I'm going to the police. I don't want to, but I will. You'd really do that? Your own nephews? To teach them that actions have consequences? Yes, because if I don't, who will? Janet was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll bring them at 3 o'clock. Marcus stood to leave, but Janet called out to him. Marcus, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't a better mother. I'm sorry I let my jealousy poison my boys. I'm sorry they hurt you and Tyler. Marcus looked at his sister, at the tears streaming down her face, at the small, cluttered apartment that represented all her struggles and failures. He wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to his rage, but all he felt was sadness. I'm sorry too, he said. Sorry that things got to this point. But Janet, we have to fix this. For their sake. He left the apartment and drove home through the rain, his mind spinning. He had thought the hard part was over when he bought the bike. He had thought his sacrifice had ended, but now he realized that the real challenge was just beginning. That afternoon, at exactly 3 o'clock, Janet's minivan pulled into Marcus's driveway. Through the living room window, Marcus watched as his sister had what looked like a heated conversation with her sons in the car. Jake sat in the passenger seat with his arms crossed, his face set in a defiant scowl. Connor in the back seat looked scared, his eyes wide and darting around. Finally, Janet got out and opened the doors for her boys. They walked slowly toward the house, Jake dragging his feet, Connor looking like he might cry. Marcus opened the door before they could knock. Come in, he said, his voice neutral. They filed into the living room. Tyler was sitting on the couch, his face pale but composed. Sarah stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder. The chrome bike with its scarred tank sat in the center of the room where Marcus had wheeled it that morning. He wanted the boys to see it, wanted them to confront what they had done. Jake and Connor stopped when they saw the bike. In the harsh light of the living room, the damage looked even worse. The scratches were deep and jagged, the letters of their names dark against the gleaming chrome. It looked like a beautiful face that had been slashed with a knife. Do you see what you did? Marcus asked quietly. Connor started crying immediately. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would look this bad. I didn't think about how much it would cost. Jake said it would be funny. Jake remained silent, his arms still crossed, his face still defiant. Funny? Marcus repeated, his voice hardening. You thought destroying 6 months of my work would be funny? Jake shrugged. It's just a bike. Marcus felt his temper flare, but before he could speak, Tyler stood up. "It's not just a bike," Tyler said, his voice shaking with emotion. "It's every hour my dad spent away from home. It's every time he came home too tired to say goodnight to me. It's every morning he left before I woke up. It's his sacrifice turned into something I could use and enjoy. And you destroyed it because you were jealous." "We weren't jealous," Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you were," Tyler said. "And I get it. I do. Your life is hard. Your mom works all the time. You don't have a dad around. I'm lucky and I know that. But that doesn't give you the right to hurt me. That doesn't make what you did okay." Connor was crying harder now, his whole body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry, Tyler. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please." Jake's defiance finally cracked. A tear ran down his face, though he quickly wiped it away. We didn't." His voice broke. "Everyone always talks about you. How great you are, how perfect you are, and I wanted to hurt you the way I hurt." Tyler walked over to his cousin and, in a gesture that made Marcus's heart ache, put his hand on Jake's shoulder. "I'm not perfect," he said quietly. "I'm just lucky. I have two parents who love me and who work hard, but that's not my fault, and it's not yours either. What is your fault is what you did to my dad's gift." Janet, who had been standing silently by the door, finally spoke. "Boys," she said, her voice firm, "apologize to your uncle. Apologize for what you've done." Connor apologized through his tears, his words tumbling over each other. Jake's apology was quieter, harder to get out, but it finally came. "I'm sorry, Uncle Marcus. I'm sorry, Tyler. What we did was wrong." Marcus looked at his nephews, at their tears and their shame, and he felt his anger begin to soften. They were just kids, hurt, jealous, acting out kids who had made a terrible mistake. But they were still family. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said. "You two are going to work off the cost of the repair. $10 an hour, 75 hours each. You'll come here every Saturday and help me with yard work, home repairs, whatever needs doing. You'll do this work without complaining, and you'll do it well. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," they both said. "And you're going to go to counseling," Marcus continued. "Your mom and I have talked, and we both agree you need help processing your feelings. I'm going to pay for it, because this is family, and family helps each other. But you have to actually try. You have to do the work. Agreed?" They nodded. "And one more thing," Marcus said. "You're going to learn about motorcycles. You're going to help me maintain Tyler's bike once it's fixed. You're going to learn to respect it and care for it. Because I want you to understand what it takes to build something valuable, not just how easy it is to destroy it." Janet stepped forward. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you." Marcus looked at his sister and saw, for the first time in years, genuine humility in her eyes. "Just make sure they follow through," he said. "That's all I ask." Over the next several months, a strange thing happened. Jake and Connor showed up every Saturday, as promised. At first, they worked in sullen silence, raking leaves and painting the fence and cleaning the garage. But slowly, week by week, something changed. Marcus talked to them while they worked. He told them stories about his own childhood, about the times he had struggled, about the mistakes he had made. He taught them about hard work and discipline, but also about forgiveness and second chances. Tyler, to his credit, treated his cousins with grace and patience. He showed them his bike, explained how it worked, taught them basic maintenance. He never held their crime over their heads, never made them feel worse than they already did. And Janet, humbled by her brother's mercy and disappointed in her own parenting, started making changes. She went to family counseling sessions with her boys. She stopped comparing them to Tyler. She started seeing a therapist herself to deal with her own jealousy and resentment. But not everyone in the family was happy with how Marcus handled things. His mother thought he was too hard on the boys. His uncle thought he should have called the police. His cousins took sides, some supporting him, others thinking he had made too big a deal out of a bike. The family fracture that had started with 2 names scratched in chrome spread like cracks in ice, reaching into every corner of their extended family. Holiday dinners became tense affairs. Birthday parties were divided between those who supported Marcus and those who thought he had gone too far. And through it all, the bike sat in Marcus's garage, its tank still scarred with those 2 names, a permanent reminder of the day jealousy and resentment destroyed 6 months of a father's sacrifice. The question that haunted Marcus, the question he would wrestle with for years to come, was simple but profound. Had he done the right thing? Should family be held to the same standards as strangers? Or should blood always get a pass, no matter what? He didn't have the answer. He still doesn't. But he knew one thing for certain. Doing the right thing is never easy, and sometimes the cost of justice is higher than anyone wants to pay. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Marcus sat in his lawyer's office in downtown Detroit. The office was in one of the renovated buildings near Campus Martius, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. His lawyer, Michael Chen, was a friend from high school who specialized in civil litigation. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Michael asked, tapping his pen against the legal pad in front of him. "Once you file, there's no going back. Family lawsuits have a way of creating permanent rifts." Marcus looked out the window at the Detroit skyline, at the Renaissance Center rising above the riverfront, at the city he had called home his entire life. "Jake and Connor have been coming every Saturday for 3 weeks," he said. "Connor does the work without complaining. He's actually good at it, asks questions, wants to learn. But Jake—" Michael nodded. "He's not following through. He shows up, but he does the bare minimum. He's resentful, angry, and Janet makes excuses for him every time I bring it up." Marcus turned back to his lawyer. "Last Saturday I found him in the garage running a key along the side of my car. He didn't think I saw him, but I did. Did you confront him?" "Of course." "He denied it, said he was just leaning against the car and his keys were in his pocket. But Michael, I saw him, deliberately keying my car, the same car I used to drive to work every day. The same car I've had for 8 years. What did Janet say? That I was paranoid, that Jake would never do something like that. She's in complete denial about who her kids are becoming." Marcus ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration he had been making a lot lately. "I gave them a chance. I gave them multiple chances, but they're not learning. They're not changing. And if I don't do something now, they're going to grow up thinking they can destroy other people's property and face no real consequences." Michael was quiet for a moment, then opened a file on his desk. "Okay, here's what we're looking at. You have clear video evidence of the vandalism. You have estimates for the repair cost. In Michigan, vandalism causing damage over $1,000 is a felony. Given that Jake is 14, he would be tried as a juvenile, but it would go on his record." "I don't want to press criminal charges," Marcus said quickly. "I want a civil suit. I want Janet held financially responsible for her son's actions." "That's possible," Michael said. "Parents can be held liable for their children's intentional acts. Given the video evidence, this is an open and shut case. The question is whether your sister can actually pay." "She can't," Marcus admitted. "She's barely making rent as it is." "Then you'll likely be awarded a judgment she can't fulfill," Michael said. "The court might set up a payment plan, but it could take years for you to see any money. And in the meantime, your relationship with your sister will be destroyed." "It's already destroyed," Marcus said quietly. "The moment she defended what her boys did, the moment she refused to make them face real consequences, our relationship ended. At least if I file suit, there's a legal record of what happened. At least there are official consequences." Michael nodded slowly. "I'll draw up the papers. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. This will get ugly. Janet will likely get a court-appointed attorney who will paint you as vindictive and cruel. They'll say you're trying to destroy a struggling single mother over a motorcycle. They'll bring up every time you've ever helped her financially and claim you lorded it over her. Are you prepared for that? Marcus thought about his sister, about the little girl who used to follow him around when they were kids, who would come to him crying when the bullies at school made fun of her clothes. He thought about all the times he had helped her over the years, all the times she had called him at midnight, needing money for rent or groceries or school supplies for her boys. He thought about how that little girl had grown into a woman so consumed by jealousy and resentment that she couldn't even hold her own children accountable for their crimes. "I'm prepared," he said. The lawsuit was filed on a cold November afternoon. Janet was served with papers at her apartment by a process server who found her coming home from one of her jobs. She called Marcus that night, and the conversation was brief and brutal. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed into the phone. "I'm your sister. We're blood. And that's exactly why I'm doing it," Marcus replied calmly, "because no one else will teach your boys that actions have consequences. If I don't, who will?" "You're trying to destroy my life over a stupid motorcycle," Janet said. "It's not about the motorcycle," Marcus said for what felt like the 100th time. "It's about respect. It's about responsibility. It's about your boys learning that they can't just destroy other people's property because they're jealous." "Well, congratulations," Janet spat. "You've succeeded in destroying our family. I hope you're proud of yourself." She hung up. It was the last conversation Marcus and Janet would have for the next 2 years. The legal process moved slowly, as legal processes always do. Janet hired a court-appointed attorney, a young public defender named Lisa Torres, who did exactly what Michael had predicted. She painted Marcus as a vindictive rich man, going after his struggling sister, conveniently leaving out the fact that Marcus was a factory worker who had destroyed his health working double shifts. But the video evidence was damning. No amount of legal maneuvering could change the fact that Jake and Connor had deliberately vandalized the motorcycle. No argument about economic hardship could erase those deep scratches spelling out their names in the chrome. The case went before a judge on a grey February afternoon, 4 months after the vandalism occurred. The courtroom was nearly empty, just the two families, their lawyers, and a court reporter. Marcus sat on one side with Sarah and Tyler. Janet sat on the other with Jake and Connor. The boys had changed in the months since Marcus had filed suit. Connor looked thinner, more withdrawn. Jake looked harder, his jaw set in permanent defiance. They didn't look at Marcus or Tyler. They stared straight ahead, their faces expressionless masks. Judge Catherine Williams, a black woman in her 50s with grey streaks in her hair and eyes that had seen too many family disputes, reviewed the evidence. She watched the security footage 3 times. She examined the photos of the damaged motorcycle. She reviewed Marcus's work record showing his 6 months of double shifts. She listened to testimony from both sides. When it was Marcus's turn to testify, he spoke clearly and calmly. "I don't want to be here," he said. "I don't want to be suing my sister. But someone has to teach these boys that you can't destroy other people's property without consequences. Their mother won't do it, so I have to." When Janet testified, she broke down crying. "I'm trying my best," she sobbed. "I work 3 jobs. I'm barely surviving. And my own brother is trying to destroy me over a motorcycle that's insured anyway." "The insurance deductible is $1,000, Marcus's lawyer interjected. Plus, his premiums increased by $300 per year for the next 5 years. The total cost to Mr. Thompson is $2,500, not to mention the 6 months of health consequences from working double shifts to purchase the motorcycle in the first place." Judge Williams called for a recess. When she returned an hour later, her face was grave. "I've presided over thousands of cases in my 20 years on the bench," she said, "and family cases are always the hardest. What I see here is a tragic breakdown of family bonds, a situation where jealousy and resentment led 2 young boys to commit a deliberate act of vandalism against their own cousin." She looked at Jake and Connor. "Young men," she said, "what you did was wrong, deeply wrong. You destroyed something that your uncle spent 6 months of his life working to provide for his son. That's not a prank. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. And crimes have consequences." She turned to Janet. "Ms. Thompson, I understand your financial struggles. I truly do. But your responsibility as a parent is to teach your children right from wrong, and to hold them accountable when they cross that line. By defending their actions, by minimizing the damage they caused, you failed in that responsibility." Finally, she looked at Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, I respect what you're trying to do here. You're trying to teach these boys a lesson that their mother won't teach them. But I want you to understand that this lawsuit will have consequences that extend far beyond money. You're destroying your relationship with your sister, possibly permanently. You're creating a family rift that may never heal. Is that really worth it?" Marcus stood. "With all due respect, Your Honor, what's the alternative? Let them get away with it. Teach them that family gets a pass no matter what they do. These boys need to learn that actions have consequences, even if those consequences are painful." Judge Williams nodded slowly. "Very well. Here is my ruling. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Marcus Thompson. The defendants, represented by their mother Janet Thompson as their legal guardian, are jointly and severally liable for $2,500 in damages to be paid in monthly installments of $100 until the debt is satisfied." Janet gasped. $100 a month? For 2 years? I can barely afford groceries. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, I am ordering Jake and Connor Thompson to complete 200 hours of community service each, to be completed within the next 12 months. They will work with Habitat for Humanity, helping to build homes for low-income families. Perhaps learning what it takes to build something will teach them not to destroy what others have built. The judge brought down her gavel. Court is adjourned. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, Marcus tried to catch his sister's eye, but Janet wouldn't look at him. She gathered her boys and left quickly, her court-appointed lawyer following behind with her briefcase. "Did we do the right thing?" Sarah asked Marcus as they walked to their car. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't know. The months that followed were strange and painful. Janet paid her $100 every month, always on time, always with a check that had blood money written in the memo line. The checks hurt Marcus more than he wanted to admit, but he cashed them anyway and put the money toward Tyler's college fund. Jake and Connor completed their community service. Marcus heard through family members that Connor had actually enjoyed it, that he had discovered a talent for construction work and was thinking about becoming a carpenter. Jake, on the other hand, had completed his hours with the same resentful defiance he brought to everything else. The family fracture widened. Marcus's mother stopped speaking to him, saying he had destroyed the family over a motorcycle. His aunt took Janet's side, organizing a family meeting where Marcus was accused of being cruel and vindictive. Tyler lost several cousins who had been his close friends, kids who were no longer allowed to associate with him because their parents supported Janet. But there were supporters too. Marcus's father, a quiet man who rarely gave opinions, pulled Marcus aside one day and said simply, "You did the right thing. Sometimes being a good man means making hard choices." Tyler's reaction surprised everyone. One evening, about 6 months after the court ruling, he came to his father with a proposal. "Dad," he said, "I want to sell the bike." Marcus looked up from the newspaper he was reading, shocked. "What? Why?" "Because every time I look at it, I see those scratches," Tyler said. "I see our family falling apart. I see Aunt Janet struggling to make those payments. I see Jake getting angrier and Connor getting sadder. The bike doesn't bring me joy anymore. It just reminds me of everything we lost." Marcus felt his heart break a little. "But I worked 6 months for that bike," he said quietly. "I know, Dad, and I'll never forget that sacrifice. But the bike was supposed to be a gift that brought our family together at my birthday party. Instead, it tore us apart. Maybe it's time to let it go. Marcus and Sarah talked about it late into the night. In the end, they agreed to let Tyler make his own decision. If he wanted to sell the bike, they would support him. Tyler sold the chrome street bike in August, almost a year after his 17th birthday. He sold it for $5,000, taking a loss but not caring. He used part of the money to pay off the remaining balance of his aunt's debt to his father. He donated another portion to Habitat for Humanity, the organization where his cousins had done their community service. The rest he put toward his college fund. When Marcus tried to give Tyler back the money he had used to pay off Janet's debt, Tyler refused. "This is my choice, Dad," he said. "You taught me that actions have consequences. Well, my action is choosing family over money. My consequence is living with whatever happens next." Marcus delivered the check to Janet himself. He stood on her doorstep, the same doorstep where he had confronted her nearly a year before, and held out the check. "Tyler sold his bike," he said. "He wanted you to have this, to clear the debt." Janet looked at the check, then at her brother. Her eyes filled with tears. "Why?" she whispered. "After everything I did, after everything I said, why would he do this?" "Because he's a better person than any of us," Marcus said simply. "He's choosing to break the cycle of resentment and anger. Maybe we should follow his example." Janet took the check with shaking hands. She stood there for a long moment, then stepped forward and hugged her brother. It was the first time they had touched in over a year, and Marcus felt his own tears start to fall. "I'm sorry," Janet whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything, for what my boys did, for how I reacted, for the years of jealousy and bitterness. I've been a terrible sister." "And I'm sorry for not understanding how hard your life has been," Marcus said, "for not being more supportive, for letting things get to the point where your boys felt they had to hurt Tyler to feel better about themselves." They stood on that doorstep and cried together, two siblings who had let pride and resentment nearly destroy their relationship, now finding their way back to each other through the wisdom of a 17-year-old boy. The healing was slow. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild itself overnight, but gradually, carefully, the family began to knit itself back together. Janet started bringing her boys to Sunday dinners again. Jake remained distant and angry for a long time, but Connor opened up, apologizing to Tyler multiple times, thanking him for what he had done. Marcus learned something profound from the entire experience. Justice and family are not opposites. Sometimes justice is the most loving thing you can offer family because it forces growth and accountability. But justice without mercy is cruelty, and mercy without justice is enablement. Finding the balance between the two is the hardest thing any person can do. 2 years after the vandalism, on Tyler's 19th birthday, something remarkable happened. Jake showed up at the Thompson house with a gift wrapped in brown paper. He had grown taller, his jaw softer, his eyes less angry. He had graduated high school, barely, and was working as an apprentice mechanic at a local garage. He handed the gift to Tyler without a word. Tyler unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a chrome motorcycle gas cap, professionally polished, with an engraving on the top that read, "For Tyler. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be better. Jake." Tyler looked at his cousin, and Jake met his eyes for the first time in 2 years. "I'm in therapy," Jake said quietly. "Real therapy, not the court-ordered stuff. I'm trying to deal with my anger, my jealousy, all of it. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying." "That's all any of us can do," Tyler said, and pulled his cousin into a hug. Marcus watched from the doorway, Sarah's hand in his, and felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. The chrome street bike was gone, sold to a stranger who would never know the story behind those scratches that had been crudely painted over. But the lesson it taught remained. Sacrifice matters, family matters, consequences matter, and sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing to do. The Thompson family would never be the same as it was before that October morning when Tyler discovered the vandalized bike. But perhaps it was better, more honest, more real. They had walked through fire and come out the other side, scarred but stronger, broken but healing. Marcus still worked at the GM plant, though he never took another double shift. His back still ached on cold mornings, a permanent reminder of those 6 months. But when he looked at Tyler, now in college studying engineering, confident and compassionate and wise beyond his years, Marcus knew that every hour of sacrifice had been worth it. Not for the bike, which was gone, but for the man his son was becoming, for the lesson that hard work and sacrifice matter, for the understanding that justice and mercy must walk hand in hand, for the knowledge that family is not about always agreeing or always getting along, but about choosing each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Years later, when Tyler had his own son, he would tell him the story of the chrome street bike. Not as a tale of what was lost, but as a story of what was learned, about the cost of jealousy, about the importance of consequences, about the power of forgiveness, and about the uncle who worked 16-hour days for 6 months, who nearly destroyed his health, who sacrificed everything to give his son a dream, only to have that dream destroyed by family, only to find that the real gift was never the bike at all. It was the lesson. The hard, painful, beautiful lesson that some things in life are worth fighting for, even when the fight costs more than you ever imagined you would have to pay. The story of Marcus Thompson and the chrome street bike raises questions that don't have easy answers. When family wrongs us, when those closest to us betray our trust and destroy what we've sacrificed for, where do we draw the line? Is blood thicker than justice? Should family get a pass that we wouldn't give to strangers? Marcus chose justice, and it cost him dearly. Relationships were broken, trust was shattered, a family was divided. But in the end, through the wisdom of his son and the hard work of rebuilding, something stronger emerged from the ruins. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have sued your own sister? Would you have let it go to preserve family peace? Is there a middle ground between enabling bad behavior and destroying family bonds? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell us, did Marcus do the right thing? Where do you draw the line when family crosses you? Your perspective matters, and your story might help someone else wrestling with a similar impossible choice. If this story made you think, if it challenged you, if it moved you in any way, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you real stories about real people facing real dilemmas, stories that don't have easy answers but force us to examine our own values and choices. And don't forget to watch the next recommended video, where we explore another powerful story about family, sacrifice, and the difficult choices we all must make when the people we love let us down. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. And thank you for being part of this community where we don't just consume stories, we learn from them.